Hello, everyone, and welcome to this beautiful conversation that I'm starting this series of online conversations with people that I find interesting, inspiring, and encouraging for the time that we live in. And my first choice was very easy because this man I've known for quite a while. I've also had the pleasure of studying under him. And that was such a huge, life changing part in my life that I'm forever grateful for what I've learned through his teachings. So last month, oh no, not last month, but earlier this month, you had a full moon meditation and I participated in it. And it felt like something came through at that particular meditation. It just entered me. And I've been going around with this podcast idea for quite a while. And it was about Leo and taking charge in your life and showing
Mm.
up in life. And that energy, that experience of sitting there in meditation and just feeling like something moved into me was stunning. I never expect anything when I sit for meditation, but that was just a marvelous experience. And the day after, I woke up and I just knew I'm going to start now. So you became a very natural first choice for me. And when I reached out and you said yes, I became very, very happy. I'm like, yes, Kenneth is in. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I introduce you to a man of great knowledge and wisdom, Kenneth Sørensen. And
Thank you, Sol. You're very kind.
well, I'm not so sure about that, but at least
And you're also honest.
I'm very honest. That's what I am. But yeah, I was extremely happy when you said yes, because your work and what you do with the world and what you show the world, I think is so incredibly important, especially in this time. We've seen the world go from well, we were quite happy before this COVID thing, or we weren't quite happy, I'd say. We were feeling it. We were starting to feel that something big is happening.
Mm.
People were tired. And then suddenly COVID happened, and then Black Lives Matter happened, and that now everybody's just going around being incredibly angry about everything, and it seems we are tearing each other down. So this is also part of why I chose to start this podcast, because I just want to bring something beautiful and inspiring into the world.
Mm.
And I think it's about time being creative and actually be a little mindful of what we put into the world.
Mm.
So, Kenneth, you've been working with astrology and psychosynthesis and as an author for the large part of your life. Would you like to share where you are currently at with your work?
Yes, as you just told, I've been working with psychosynthesis for quite a while, very actively the last 15 years. It has been the prominent focus of what I'm doing a lot of different works around that. And for the people who don't know about psychosynthesis, I can say a little bit about it. It's transpersonal psychology founded by Roberto Assagioli. He was an Italian psychiatrist and he died in 1974. And psychosynthesis is about learning who you are, waking up to yourself as the observer, connecting with your will, and also understanding that there is some kind of an evolutionary force. There's something that wants to develop in us. There's something that wants to be something authentic that wants to come through us. And it's actually life. And psychosynthesis is about learning to serve that life, this life that is the one life that is awake in us and driving us towards our fulfillment, becoming whole, expressing who we are, and all the different techniques and different types of understanding is part of psychosynthesis. And I've been working a lot with this, and also in particularly what's been called the 7 types. I have a company together with a partner where we work with the types and help people understanding their there are different types. There's soul type, personality type, mental, emotional, and physical types. So it's all about learning to know oneself and anchor into the spirit inside, learning to transform all the woundedness, all the inhibitions that we have. So I come from a place where I've been and still are very inhibited, have a lot of suffering as a young man, very vulnerable and couldn't express myself. So I was in some way been beating up by life, having all these vulnerabilities. So I just had to do something about it. And it started out with astrology, and then it became meditation, and then in the beginning of the 2000, it became psychosynthesis. So, and I've helped people, tap into this life force of them, this evolutionary drive within, and becoming more and more authentic with what they do and how they present themselves. So this is actually what I'm doing, and writing books about it, and having courses, and stuff like that.
Well, I'm so glad you're active. I mean, I remember the first time it was in Oslo when I did the training for mindfulness. You had those classes. And I had a peak experience in my meditation back then. I suddenly realized what silence is. It was like entering into this vast area of silence. And it's unforgettable. Once you're there, you're there. And I'd also been meditating for a lot of years, but the techniques that you showed us and the guidance that you did, it was just simply, it created such an atmosphere that it was easy to gain access to it. Like it probably with some group dynamics happening, like together we are stronger and together we can reach deeper when we sit together. I found something in your bio. You have a beautiful bio. What I like about your bio is that it's so honest. It's like, this is what I went through and it was not very cool, but I found lots of tools and it helped me on the path of being human, just becoming human, and I felt that to be a relief in a world of not to badmouth anybody. Actually, I think there's a lot of good people out there, but very often the glossy aspect of spirituality is what hits you first, and it's like it's put up on some pedestal, this experience of meditation and this experience of spirituality. It's something that becomes quite a pressure for most people, like when they enter into the world of spirituality, because they really don't feel like they have had any of those experiences, and there's too little talk about that shadow work, actually.
Exactly.
And too much of this spiritual bypassing. And you're right. Looking back, it seems like a process of digging myself out of unconsciousness, of abandoning a protective shield of inadequacy. I had to be free of the limitations of my previous life. This is an endless journey. Every time you experience freedom, a new door opens to an even greater freedom. And I think that's sort of for anybody who's been or who's attempting to have some sort of meditation routine in their life, which we all know can be very difficult, to have that discipline and to have that willpower to actually do it. We will talk a little bit about willpower a little bit later, but I want to touch upon the subject of meditation, because it seems through all the way, the one thing that goes, even though you developed as a human being, the meditation seems to be the most important turning point for you, and also the most important, the one thing that is pretty much the same, the consistent, the path, in a way, if you want to call it something.
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of very important practices or way of being in life, and one of them is meditation. I think that's extremely important. but also, always expanding your mind, your understanding, your psychological understanding of what goes on in you. We all need a good map, and we get, we have different taste of what type of map we like, but we need a good map, a good psychological understanding. So we need to evolve that aspect of ourselves too. And then, of course, we also need some positive output in the world, because very often, life is suffering, and we all experience suffering. But if we have something meaningful to focus at, and just walking our life together with other people, then we can much easier let go of this self-occupying business of always digging up all the wounds and all the painful things that will, I guess, for most of us, be part of our life for the rest of our lives. So I think, and this is also where the will come in, when we have an external focus, we want to contribute to the world with our talents, with something positive to give, while we are suffering and while we are enjoying ourselves, So I think there must be a balance between introspection, which is the meditation part, the psychological understanding, and action. We need really to have an output. I have so many times, I worked as a psychotherapist, and many times when I woke up, I felt very, very heavy, emotionally heavy. I would not say depressed, but just very heavy. And then when I have had my first client, it just disappeared.
Yeah.
In this connection with another human being, you forget yourself and you make yourself available, then energies from the soul can pour through, and you forget yourself in good work. And it can be any type of work that you really love. But of course, meditation is extremely important in order to really wake up to the fundamental reality of who you are. And perhaps we can talk a little bit about that.
Because, yeah. Who are you anyway?
Yeah.
I had my daughter. We were walking on. We were out. We had some beautiful walks this summer, just me and her, through the woods to a place where we went to swim. And my daughter is a very interesting human being, I think. Of course, totally neutral. But we were talking about consciousness. And then she asked me the most brilliant question. She's 13 years old, and she said, "Mother, I wonder who's thinking all the thoughts. If you take away everything that goes around in my body, like all the instincts and everything that the body has to do, who am I underneath all that?" And that's like a 13-year-old. She must be mentioned. She's this new Pluto in Sagittarius generation. It's like they have some interesting connections to the cosmos and to that type of consciousness. It seems it will be very, very interesting to see them unfold. But the question in itself made me so happy, because if I had at that time, when I was 13, asked that question, who is it that's thinking all these thoughts? What are these thoughts anyway? Is it like, whose thoughts are they, in a way? Like you start a very inquiring process by becoming aware of what you described in the classes we took as the center of consciousness, or the eye of consciousness.
Yes. Yeah. Central in psychosynthesis is the notion that we have this center of pure self-awareness. And actually, Assagioli was very, I think, successful in integrating the best of the wisdom from the East together with all the knowledge about the unconscious. So in some way, you can say he blended Eastern and Western philosophy and science. And the most central part in psychosynthesis is to wake up to the fact that you are consciousness. And his very famous disidentification exercise is all about, yes, you have a body, you appreciate your body, but you're not your body. You have emotional states, but you're not your emotions. And you have all these thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. And when you're stepping back from the attachment and the identification with your sensations, your emotions, your mind, then what is left? This is you as the observer, you as the loving observer. And it's not easy to get to this point because we have been so engrossed or so identified with all the stories in our head, but starting to practice just sitting quietly and observing what's going on in the mind and starting to disidentify, disentangle yourself from all these attachment, all these stories that goes on within your mind is so important. And what happens is that you start to observe an inner silence. If you are doing this on a regular basis, then you will start to observe that you can actually just be aware, be present, be silent, and be with whatever is present in the content of your awareness. And I remember for some years ago, after I have practiced this awareness meditation for some while, that I had some permanent stillness within my head. I was wondering, how can I sit in a social gathering with a lot of people around me, and then I'm just totally relaxed and at ease, and there's nothing going on in my head. I have nothing to say or nothing to do. And then I realized that actually this was the observer. So to learn this is just as difficult as to learn to play a guitar good. You have to practice, and you have to practice every day. But if you do it, then silently, what has been called the inner void of silent observation, silent just beingness. And it's not a spiritual experience. It's not like you are expanded into the infinitive. It's just that you can rest in the present now and just being you, and just see how are you influenced by what is going on around you and what's going on in you, and then speak when you have something to say, and be quiet if you don't have anything particularly to say. So I would say that was really something that I'm very happy about. Today, I will say I have the ability to be present to what's going on inside of me. That's not the same as I can master what's going on in myself, because I can be just as fucked up as many other people, but I'm aware I'm fucked up most of the time. And I have this spot inside, and I can just watch myself. Wow, Kenneth, you're out on a ride now. You are identified with your emotions, but if we have found this observer, we have found a vantage point from where we can start loving what's going on, accepting what's going on, and start conquering your nature. It could be instinctual patterns, it could be old wounds coming up, or something different. And this is where the will comes in. It takes a lot of effort to really transform all the old shadows that we are carrying around. Yeah.
And that's some of the problems we are exposed to when we work, when people want to work with themselves. I've tried everything. I'm trying to, like I've been processing this for 20 years. Nothing really changes. It seems we need one of those heightened peak moments, experiences where we just get in touch with I would say a deeper or higher state. And that's the reason I fell in love with the concept of psychosynthesis. And people try to explain it. What is it? Well, it includes the higher self. It takes the higher self seriously. And for me, that is so important, because what you describe here it's it's what we call a basic mindfulness approach to your mind and emotions and your physical being and the surroundings. Now that's a very important step in developing discipline, just being able to discipline your mind a little bit. But the other thing that I really love about my own meditation practice in particular, of course, is that there's openness to a higher state as well. Like, so when everything is quiet, where do you go then? There, like what state is it that you are trying to access in your own life, rather than just swimming around in unconscious patterns, which sometimes, absolutely can take you by surprise and drag you in. But we have that choice if we want to get to a higher state of creative inspiration. And this is some of I think that's the efficiency of the approach, actually, that there is a higher self. And I love it that Asagyoli was so curious about where does all the art come from and where does all the genius come from and who are we really? Because that type of flow state, and I did take your training as a soul flow therapist, and that's when we really learned, and it's a beautiful approach, this learning how to meet that which is taking over our will and pulling us into the deep unconscious and taking away our freedom to make good choices for ourselves through repeating some compulsions that has been repeated many, many times before. And we can call it loosely karma, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but normally we want to, the way that I see a lot of, cognitive therapy and the choices people have when they want to go see somebody, it's like in the world where in the regular psychology world, is that there's a lot of talking about stuff. And I think it's developing now. There seems to be more focus on the action aspect of it, time to move forward, time to also do something. Release is good, but we also have to create something new with this, and move away from it. And the soul flow technique that you and Søren developed in a way, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how this is a technique where we enter into the field of the persona, where we see different aspects of our persona being represented by different sub-personalities.
Exactly.
And yes, coming from both upper and lower regions of ourselves, being part of our history, but also being part of our innate natural talents. And I love this alchemy approach to it. Like something that you consider to be your worst inner enemy is actually a haven full, it's a garden full of treasures. And if we can just access the energy in the correct way without getting stuck, but being able to move forward with it, we don't have to fight ourselves the way that sometimes people who struggle with themselves do, like this fighting. In healing, we say, what you resist persists.
Exactly.
So,
and I think with respect to meditation, I would say awareness is the first and most important aspect, because if we are not aware of things within us, then we cannot work with it, then we are unconscious of it. So to develop, our ability to observe what's going on, to actually start identify with ourselves as the observer, I think that's really an important aspect. And the next aspect is also to start loving it, to have a love affair with what's going on inside you. Even, the worst part of you that really causing a lot of suffering, if we can start holding a big heart for it. And that's also crucial in the soul flow method, creating this loving field, this space where whatever is inside of me, it is allowed to be there and come up and be seen. And also, of course, will, which is that we have the courage to confront ourselves with what is not that nice inside of us, and also controlling. And I'm not saying suppressing ourselves, but I'm saying sometimes we have to control impulses in us. We can have an impulse to hit somebody or say something very nasty to a person, and we are not allowed just to, it's not very wise to just express everything that's inside of us, because we create a lot of suffering around us. So we need the will also to choose who we are, and that's where authenticity comes in. That we have all, when we start to observe and love what's inside of us, we also get more choices. We get more freedom of how we want to express. Because I can come from my angry part, I can come from my humoristic part, I can come from a more vulnerable part. It's all a choice. If we have created the awareness space and the loving ourselves as the loving observer. So this is where will come in as the freedom of choice. And sometimes we just have to say, no, I'm not going out of this. I would love to say this and this, but I'm not allowing myself to do, because I know I come from a place of revenge, and it's actually not about this person. It's about my old wound with my father, or my background, or whatever.
Yeah.
So we really need that will to, and it's the will that defines us. It's what we choose to express that will define us in our relationships, not the things that we carry around. We are not responsible for all the thoughts in our heads, because it could be collective thoughts, but we are responsible for the thoughts that we are giving life and we express through words. Then it catches us, and then it's part of our how we define ourselves. So the will is how we step into life, how we create an individual expression, and how we show up in the world.
Yeah, it's mentioned as it's kind of like a masculine approach in a way, because you take control. You are the captain of the ship.
Exactly.
You're the one regulating the psychological functions in a way. And
Yeah.
I find it today. It's because of all this suppression that we've experienced through, in particular, religious. Judgmental attitudes about what is appropriate to express and not. We seem to have a counter movement in our modern world to sort of flaunt it as it comes through us, without paying no attention to who it hits, and without being and it's almost like it's I sometimes think about this concept of freedom. I mean, where did we get that wrong? Because what is freedom without responsibility? There has to be
Exactly.
like, this is like, yeah, this freedom for you, but what? I mean, is it helping? That's the thing, Is it helpful? And I understand this need to regulate. There is Erin Sullivan wrote a book about Saturn, which is probably the archetypal principle as we know it in astrology that we are
Yeah.
talking about. This willpower, this capacity to regulate yourself. And she says in the opening part of that book that civilization depends on suppression. She writes. We should probably rephrase that and say civilization depends on conscious regulation of yourself.
Exactly.
Because we have to live under the same sky together, and we share this earth. So we just have to. And there was this beautiful there's an excellent interview with Roberto Assagioli on your website that I recommend people go and take a look at. And it's about this he writes about the will. It bears directly on the great problem of war and peace. And he writes, I have little faith that treaties, pacts, armies, power balances, and other external manipulations will achieve any solution to this problem. And I think, this eagerness of pointing fingers, of putting, like, we want others to work, but we don't want to put in the work ourselves. And we have to go back to this suppression thing that we came out of? No way, mister. Like, no, I got my freedom here. I want to be free to express myself as I feel. And I think also because a lot of people actually have a little trouble expressing their true feelings and their
Mm.
true emotions, this could easily be a little misunderstood. Being conscious isn't easy, right? It's sort of
No.
when you're self-aware, it I know it's kind of a crisis in a way because you have your subjective needs and feelings, and on the other hand, you have a bigger viewpoint, like a more you see humanity, for instance, or you
Mm.
see like you have to take into consideration other people's feelings and their actually their world in a way. So
I think whenever we really start to pay attention to what goes on inside of ourselves, we know we start to notice that we inhabit very many different voices. Some of the voices inside of us is very egocentric, and they are all about our own survival, and we still need that voices in order to create fundamental security. But we have also more mature aspects of us which can take the position of others, which can include the society, the needs of our family, and the more you could call it ethnocentric voices that see ourselves as a more social self. And if we really start to listen to the silent voices, we can connect with ourselves as a soul. And then we have a much more humanistic and loving inner voice that sees our role in life in a more global perspective.
mm,
uh, so we have this responsibility to choose where we are coming from, what level, what floor of our inner house are we acting from. And sometimes, yes, a good, healthy aggression can be okay if we really want to put up a boundary, but sometimes we have to inhibit the inner warrior and come from a more listening side of ourselves, because we can, from a wisdom point of view, see this will be more beneficial for ourselves and for
mm,
the people around us. So it's all about this dance between me as the observer, the aware consciousness, and noticing all these different voices coming in from all the different parts of my inner house, and then deciding with my will what actor is now stepping out on the stage. In some way, as a Jolie, love to see life as a stage play.
mm,
We all have roles to play here in life, and we better play them good and play them authentic. But we are meant to be the instructors who know what is the play all about, and what type of actor is having a role at this moment. Sometimes the warrior comes from, other times the inner wise woman comes forward, and yeah.
mm.
So life is this dance between this multiplicity we have inside ourselves.
I often thought that was very difficult because I was very self-conscious growing up. It was like to my detriment. It took
Mm,
away a lot of my natural spontaneity, like it prevented me going out on stages, singing and just doing what I dreamt of doing.
mm,
And of course, that changed a lot when that inner critical voice turned into a more a voice of empathy.
mm.
Like that, then I could hold space for the mistakes, if you want to call them something, all the blunders, all the awkward moments,
Mm,
all the embarrassing moments that I went through. And that was a big life changer. But ever since, I think, as we understand our service, which is especially in more esoteric, more hardcore esoteric circles, it's just figuring out what's the plan of your life. Why are
mm,
you here? What is the intention, the will of the soul in a way. And then sometimes, yeah, it would be ridiculous because to be just lenient all the time and be some la 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 happy with everything, it's necessary to also confront and use that masculine aspect of
mm,
calling out bullshit, for instance,
exactly.
and setting down boundaries. And for, I don't know, maybe it's easier for men to do it, or it's a little bit prohibited that women go out and do things like that. Like there are different rules for men and women, and it goes both directions. It go both ways. So
Mm,
I think a woman is have more easy access to the holding space part, the
mm,
nurturing part, whereas the man has more. Men very often maybe feel more naturally home with being, the more fatherly aspect of it, and that's also pushing a little bit. Today I'm a little worried actually that we are suppressing some of that fatherly will.
mm,
And actually I've been thinking about that a lot because of what I call political correctness.
mm,
And of course it's based on this concept of holding space for the hurts and traumas of humanity. Absolutely, I see that one. But on the other hand, if we don't get that little push, that little masculine push, that
mm.
inspired action, moving away from our own woundology in a way,
Yeah.
simply not giving it more energy, just allowing ourselves to become new human beings. I think that's very difficult for a lot of people. Like we hold each other back to old identities, and very often force each other into a limited amount of sub personas that are allowed to to show outside, like
Yeah. I very agree that there is a really, there's a backside to political correctness, and, being identified with a victim identity. There's not much. There is power in it, but it's a very unhealthy type of power because it's not based on something positive inside of yourself. It's some kind of a group identity that is trauma based. It's a trauma based group
yeah, yeah,
identity, and we know whatever we identify with, it will bring in the energy, so we can become so attached to the rage and the anger that is part of that very real suppression that has been historically. But you have to have a place where you can step out of this because we are much more than our group identities. We are first and foremost, a soul. The soul
mm,
is masculine, feminine, and it's not bound into racial differences, gender differences, and all that. We have a place where we can step out of all those group roles and group identities. And it's so important for me to help people align with that part of them that is not touched by trauma, because the soul is the part of us that has never encountered trauma. It's the transcendent part of us that is whole, that is good, that is healthy. So knowing that there's this part of us that is pure love, pure light, pure will and power, in the midst of whatever we are caught up in, is a big hope. And connecting with that part of us
mm.
in meditation and bringing these energies in can help us grow out of a victim identity.
Yeah, I think like it's the thing that sometimes when I look at this from a very like like I try to get an overview. I mean, the groups and the problems of having different kinds of groups cooperating on this planet. It is like we hold each other into the group
Mm,
by like you can't do that because you have to be loyal to us.
mm,
There's like these group dynamics that are often challenging this individuality to a great degree.
mm,
Although I also, like I think the only way out of this is to go completely beyond gender and race and economical classes as well.
mm,
But it seems we're not willing to do that. We don't want to do that because we want to uphold this old narrative. Like I remember once I had an experience with somebody that I worked quite tightly with, and she had had a very intense experience with her some very close relative, and she was insisting throughout the years that she wanted justice. She wanted to be acknowledged for her pain.
Mm.
That never happened.
No.
The person died and she never
Mm.
got it. And
Mm.
then she realized, oh my God, I just been wasting so much time trying, being run by this victim voice inside of my head, trying to push something I thought that would give me healing.
Mm.
It never came, of course, and maybe that's one of these cosmic jokes that we sometimes are encountering. It never came. The justice that she wanted never came.
Mm.
So she had to redo her whole
Mm.
identity in a way,
Mm. Mm.
and kind of start identifying with more healthier aspect of herself. Now
Mm.
that would be the equivalent of what we sometimes see in esoteric lore. I like to call it lore, as starving out something, right?
Mm. Mm. By putting your attention to something healthy. I think it's very important to have a balanced viewpoint, because from one point of view, it's extremely important to validate and acknowledge the hurt that has been done, the injustices that is perhaps still prevailing. That's one part of it. That's the inclusive part of it. That's the loving part of it. Uh, and then it is also important to say, I'm more than this. I'm not just my trauma. I'm not going to be defined only by my past or by this role, this small aspect of me. So we, in some way, have a place where we can reach for some higher ground, where we can step out of the victimhood and take responsibility for living a life in accordance with the totality of us. And by the totality, I'm also pointing to this place I call soul, and which is the loving, the willing, and the aware part of us, because this is where the freedom is for all of us. So I don't think it's not about denying hurt, because we know as a psychotherapist we have to be present to the trauma. We have to engage with it. We have to acknowledge it. But at some point, we also need to move on.
Yeah.
So, and this is the balance that each and every of us will need to find.
Yeah, I think, as Aguli mentions, is as the first part of the therapy is always motherly, holding space, being
Yes.
accepting, and the second part is actually more motivating. It's encouraging, and I must say, just through my own life, the way that I've experienced my own development is that I think the moment that I started to see my talents in the way that they presented themselves, to see my strengths, to
Mm.
see the more upper level aspects of my being, was such a refreshing time, because we all want to get out of our trouble. We all want to feel better. We all want to um, be happier with ourselves. I think that's like a very basic human need. We all want to feel like someone. We all
Mm.
want to feel like we are not necessarily a big ego thing, but like we're alive. We want
Mm.
to feel like we're alive. And constantly going back, constantly trying to dig out the diamond, but doing it in the wrong way or in the wrong place is
Mm.
what like really gave me a lot of um, in a way a little bit of challenge in this world, because we are still generally speaking at a level where we are in a way holding space for a lot of stuff. We're
Mm.
holding space for this and we're holding space for that, and it's beautiful, I think so, because humanity probably is working its way out of a lot of judgments and a lot of dogma. So
Mm.
it's nice for us to have an open mind and understand that even if we didn't go through this, other people might go through it.
Mm.
But resting there for a lifetime is not in my own interest, to be quite
No.
honest.
No.
No, really. And that's why I find such a relief through the psychosynthesis, actually. And I think it needs to I mean, I hope it will blossom even further into the world. Many people go like, so what is psychosynthesis? Because
mm,
I tell them what soul flow is, and they go like, what is it then? And I tried very simply to describe, the model of the soul, and then there's the formation of a persona, and within the persona there's all these multiple
mm,
sub personalities, and some of them are in pain, and that's what we work with,
mm.
just to get them to pull the foot out of the mud and start. And as you which I thought was so beautiful, there was this focus on having the orchestra play in tune and not having the
Yes,
drummer go out and do his own thing.
yes,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
I think what's most important right now in respect to the times we are living in, there's so much conspiracy thinking, there's so much lying going on from politicians. And I think it's so important not to be caught up in ideology.
Mm,
It's so important because when we get obsessed by one type of ideology or another, we get trapped within a cage where everything we see is through the lens of this particular ideology. And I think this is where meditation and the work that we have described really can help us becoming free and not being loyal, particularly to any particular ideology, but staying in some way in the midpoint where we are not getting caught by political ideas, religious ideas, but can be this detached observer that can in some way step out of it all, because this is where we are free to voice our authentic beliefs. And I think this is really important for anybody today, that we are not, following all the ideologies and all the shaming that goes on if you have the wrong opinion. But we each and every of us make our minds up and speak our truth, um, because this is how we become individuals. This is how we step into life. This is how we show up, and sometimes we are aligned with some perspectives, but at other times we are aligned with other perspectives. And I think it's so important for the awakened, the spiritual seekers, that they really work on becoming independent
mm.
actors in the world, and not, just following the current mainstream narrative out there. But
The
whenever,
one out of the two,
yes,
the left
exactly.
or the right. Yeah.
But have a practice of disobedience, have
Mm,
a practice of voicing the truth whenever you can see that, no, I don't see it like this, I see it like this. Because I think it's so important that we keep the variety of voices and don't become, obsessed by group thinking, um, because it will close down creativity, different perspectives, and it will create a collective presence for all of us.
yeah, I'm worried about the mental health of a lot of people, to quite honest. I never these polarities that we are seeing right now are very unhealthy, and it's there is some appeal to anger that is constantly going on. um, and I've been concerned about the safety of communication, to be quite honest, because
Mm,
there are some restrictions on the freedom of speech,
mm,
not because we are not allowed to say what we see and what we feel. It's because there's a massive attack afterwards going on. Like,
exactly.
people are being shamed or like being bullied to not
Mm,
have those viewpoints. And
yeah.
I'm constantly thinking about the archetype, the bully, these days. It's been on my mind for a lot of time, actually
Mm,
since somebody came to power, and I noticed that a lot of bullies get to the top, like and
Yes.
the whole archetype of bullying is coming in as a mental reflection these days for me. Like, what
Yeah.
is it? Why do we obey these bullies? Why do we obey bullying? Why can't we? Why does it close down openness and also actually good communication? you
Mm,
know um, and it's not necessarily when we sit with each other like now, right, face to face.
mm.
Like I would behave now
Yeah,
because you're there in my face. But if
exactly.
I was behind my computer and I was just like
Mm,
reacting on something, and what the who does this person think they are? I'm
mm,
going to show them. It's like we take on this persona where we go out and fight, as like this internet activism, and with any means possible. Like, there's
mm.
like no rules anymore to general sophistication, and no rules applies anymore. We don't want them. And for me, it's like, I'm hoping that my vision is not correct, but I'm a little worried for the mental health for a lot of people on Earth today.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah, there's a lot of polarization going on, and I think the answer to that is that we find this place inside of us where we can be free, where we can have a free space to make up our own mind, and not just jumping into all those pre-prepared narratives. Uh, and one very important um, question right now is, the situation in U.S. and the problem with Trump. And I think it's really important to differentiate between Trump as this very divisive person he is, and the working class people who is voting him in. I come from a working class background myself, so I can see how these people really has been being fucked up for so many
yeah, yeah,
many
yeah.
years. So if we forget the compassion
Mm,
for working class people and trying to really address their needs, uh, then we get in a bad situation if we cannot hold compassion for these people. But it's too easy for persons like Trump to um, speak into the anger and the problems that they have. Um, so I think we shall be very, very careful not to alienate big groups of people as deplorables or something that we cannot be with, because then we will never create a better world. And I think that's what it's all about, bringing
yeah.
people together
Yes.
by by addressing the needs that is really there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see the need to get rid of parasitical energies, like people who are just completely abusive in their whole being and form.
Yeah.
But the the whole energy right now is just about pointing fingers and telling each other that we're
Mm,
stupid, and you're
mm,
stupid, but you're stupider. And the aggression, even though we are not in the United States, both you and me are in Norway.
mm,
The world is increasingly you know busy with what's going on in the United States, and I understand that it holds such huge symbolical power
yeah.
for us as human beings, because of it's just such a culturally influential
Mm,
state.
mm,
And whatever goes on there, everybody's looking to the United States to see what's going on.
mm, mm,
And so it affects us all. So in a way, it is a certain global war,
mm,
and we see the kind of division in Europe in as well, and also
yeah.
in any other place on earth, actually. And I think, yeah, absolutely, these, I don't know, the working class people who are now um, well, mostly inspired to vote Trump, ironically, right?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
I abs-
ironically.
yeah, ironically, because and which is very strange, I think, when you look at it from a bigger perspective.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I even want to extend my compassion to people like Trump, for instance, which we've heard a lot of stuff about him. We've heard he's like this, he's like that. He's a father too, for instance, And I also saw a glimpse of something pure inside of him. It was one interview, and I was so surprised I had that experience.
Mm.
It was like he was trying to defend something in his way, the way he
Mm.
tries to defend something, and it was put on a spot in a very mocking way by this journalist. And of course, the journalist, I mean, by all means, was right, So it's like, okay, you have to take this in, Mr. Trump,
Mm.
like. But at the same time, he was really like there was something in his, almost like I could see a bit of his heart there.
Mm.
And it was such a beautiful moment, and it really woke me up. And I thought, oh my goodness, everybody's a human being.
Mm.
No matter what, like
Mm.
everybody deserves a chance. And I'm not kidding. I am absolutely not kidding. And
Mm.
it's like that for me, it's like it's been more and more the path of, I don't know what to call it. I'm not trying to become perfect. I'm just trying to become liberated, to be quite
Mm.
honest, so that
Mm.
I can have this pure consciousness that I enjoy, like that I find creative. And if the less hatred I indulge in or
Mm.
entertain in my mind, the less isms I go into, the better my mind works. It's
Mm.
practical.
Yeah, and if we should round it up, we can say in some way that what we have been speaking about here is that we are all enmeshed or embedded in a psychological smog. And I think the psychological smog has become denser
Hmm.
the last couple of years. So how do we deal with this psychological smog? We deal it by developing the tools we have inside of ourselves, and it's disidentifying from the smog, knowing that I'm the observer, I'm pure consciousness, and I also have a critical mind. I have to not just buying into all the narratives that I listen to, but I need to exercise my critical, analytical, factual cognition too, and have good people around me who I can exchange idea and opinions with. And by doing that, creating a more independent mind, having a more observant mindset in the current crisis. And I think meditation is one of the most important tools
Hmm.
we can exercise, because meditation is a way of purifying the mind, stepping out of the mind stream, stepping out of the smog, and just looking at it, containing it, and I work with 4 different types of meditation. Awareness meditation is just being aware of whatever arises in consciousness. And then we have reflective meditation. And reflective meditation is asking questions to what goes on in your mind, analyzing them, thinking about what's going on in your mind. And you can do that when you start disidentifying.
Hmm.
And receptive meditation is about listening to the higher answers, listening to the voice within from the soul. And the last type of meditation I work with is a creative meditation, which is based on visualization, which is based on creating the type of qualities you want to have more of in your personality: joy, wisdom, beauty, whatever
Hmm.
you need more of. So meditation is some kind of a mental science where you can step out of it all through awareness meditation and start working creatively with all the different energies that you are embedded in. And I think everybody really need to sharpening these tools in the times we are in, because if we have this ability to step out of it all, finding the quiet zone and questioning the narratives, then we have found a place where we are more untouched by all the smog that is coming in at the moment.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And it's, I love the summary you did there, the 4 meditations. That was just like very clear. Absolutely. I see where I want to work next, to be quite honest. Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But I'm so happy I've had that. Like this urge. I have my own energy that I know myself well. I know what I react to and how I can react quickly and what not.
Mm.
And more and more as as 2020 started to unfold, I saw it was more and more important to put part of my persona at the back burner and start becoming less reactive to certain, or less impulsive when it comes to
Yeah.
communication. And so yeah, and so yeah, we'll see what happens with humanity. These are interesting times,
Yeah,
although a little
absolutely.
intense, huh? Well, Kenneth, we have
Yes.
covered a lot of ground today. I'm very happy that
Yeah.
you wanted to share. This is the new moon today as well in Leo, so
Yeah.
it's I mean, you use the moon phases a little bit when you meditate, or because I know they do that in
Yes.
Tibetan meditation techniques. They always go by the
Yes.
moon. So what would be a good new moon thing? Like an intention, to put down an intention.
Wow, yes, we have a new moon now in Leo, and it's all about courage. Pretty much the lion heart, the new moon in Leo will activate the lion heart. So go out and be courageous. And the most courageous you can be is by being yourself, raw and show up in the world. And it can be in relation to your children, your parents, your co-workers, your friends, the world at large. But the most important question you can ask yourself right now is, am I really true to myself right now where I am, and stepping into this authentic place and starting that cycle, because the new moon meditation is the start of the cycle. This is the beginning, and then you can harvest an insight when you come to the full moon. This is where you get inspired by what you really put into action at new moon. So, and then that insight you get around full moon, you embody it through until the next new moon. So there is some kind of a birth and culmination through the moon cycle. It's really, really beautiful. And actually, I wrote an article about it called New Moon and Full Moon Meditations. And if you make a search on it on the internet, it will come up.
It's on your site.
It's on my website, Kenneth.
Wonderful. Then people can
Yes.
just check the link underneath here, because I
Yeah.
will put it in there. All right,
Okay.
so I'm going to meditate on that then. And fortunately, the next full moon will be actually in Virgo. So some
Yes.
practical application of whatever you learned will be available, I'm sure.
Yeah,
All the
exactly.
details to get
Yeah.
everything, to the next level. Well, okay. Thank you very much, Kenneth. And as I said, if you want to get in touch with him, you will find the info available underneath here.
Hmm.
Thank you very much for listening, and I hope
Yes.
to see you around the next time.